We'll do a little bit of Syria watch. Obviously, the rebel groups that are anti-Assad, so they're the good guys unconditionally. Those rebel groups are, they bouldered into Aleppo and took it pretty quickly, as a matter of fact, like a lot faster than anybody could have thought it would have happened. And it's really interesting. Felix had a funny take on it. He said, NATO is awesome. Turkey has essentially run an H-1B visa program for prospective ISIS and HTS members for over a decade. And the only thing they've actually gotten in trouble for during that time was buying S-400s. It's true. NATO is so sick. NATO is like, oh, dude, are you bombing Kurdish villages into oblivion? Did you just cut off water? Did you cut off water access to like 1 million Kurds? That's fine. I don't care. Okay? That's okay. It's all good, baby. You do your thing. You know, you got security concerns. That's fine. You got security concerns. What are you going to do? You want these Kurds to have water? Get out of here. Okay? Oh, did you train? People on Twitter are saying the rebels are ISIS. They are. Some of them are. Okay? The Syrian situation is like obviously a little bit more complex than something like Israel-Palestine, where the morality is very clear. At least, maybe the ways in which there is a just and legitimate solution might be complex, but like the morality of the situation is clear. Whereas like in Syria, every side is bad. The one side that you can say is good is the Kurdish militias, but then even then they've also kind of done some fucked up things as well at a certain point. So everybody's done some shit, but like the least bad part definitely would be the Kurdish the Kurdish militia forces, which is interesting because they are also backed by the CIA and they've gotten training by the CIA. But for the most part, those guys have been the anti-ISIS forces, and they were very successful in fighting against ISIS, and they've done a really good job doing that. But the issue here is Turkey is also, by way of NATO, the State Department's operatives here, and Turkey is literally priming, funding, facilitating, arming, training the most militant Islamists in the region, and they have successfully overtaken Aleppo at this point. And it's a very weird set of circumstances because you have the Assad government, okay, done a lot of fucked up shit, okay? Very legitimate reasons as to why people would, try to have a Arab Spring style democratic revolutionary resistance against the Assad regime. But then, of course, as is the case with many of these valid anger and resentment movements that spurn out organically, it's very quickly captured and overtaken by a lot of people who are personally invested in regime change for different reasons. So it's really interesting because on the one hand, you have the Assad government, okay, not good guys. They're not, okay? It's like, I would say very similar to Saddam. They're Ba'athist. They're not fundamentalist at all. Just make no mistake. There are differences here. They're still ruthless. They're still brutal. They're still cruel, but they're not like the fundies. And then on the other side, you have these like Sunni fundy groups, okay? The Salafist groups, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, former ISIS, former Al-Qaeda. They're always cross-pollinating a little bit. And Turkey's backing those guys. Turkey's giving them weapons. Also on the other side, though, Turkey's doing this at the behest of the United States of America. Turkey's a NATO ally. They get to do that. But on the other side, Turkey's literally cooking the other State Department initiative, which is the YPJ and the Syrian Defense Forces that are like the Kurdish militia movements that have existed and gotten funding and training from the American State Department. So you literally have America's own assets fighting against America's other assets in the region because they're fighting against one another. And then you have Hezbollah, which has defended the Assad regime and engaged with some of the Sunni militias, some of which are, the ISIS and al-Nusra, like ISIS, the Salafist militias. You have the Russian government that is also backing the Assad regime as well. So overall, it's like every regional actor is you know, they're just trying to take a piece of it. They're trying to move the needle in whichever way they can. Iran is also obviously by way of Hezbollah, and Iran directly is also helping Syria. And if you want to try and understand it from like the perspective of Hamas, for example, during the initial Arab Spring uprisings, obviously Hamas itself is originally a Muslim Brotherhood movement. So they're like Sunni fundis as well. They're Sunni fundamentalists themselves. In its, as an initial movement, it was a Muslim Brotherhood cutout. So they literally originally were like in support of the Syrian revolution against the Assad regime. So then they kind of had a period of not really with the Syrian government, and the Syrian government definitely never forgot that and was like, yo, fuck you guys for, being along, siding with these guys. Like, some of these dudes are ISIS, you piece of shit. And then they were like, well, we don't care. Stop being cruel. Stop being brutal. Even though they originally literally had their headquarters in Syria as well, Hamas, I mean, and then Hamas had to pack up shop and basically move from Syria to Qatar. But now their relationship has actually normalized between Syria, and also the relationship between Hamas and Syria has also normalized. The problem, however, is that it's not like Syria is offering a tremendous amount of funding or helping the Hamas militancy against Israel either, because they have their own shit going on. And ultimately, the worst part about it is that the worst thing that's going to happen is, of course, to the Syrian population, as always, they're just going to get, they're being tossed around from one brutal regime to ISIS militants. It's insane. So it's a weird situation overall. It's very chaotic. I don't know where it's going to go overall, but basically everything ties together. Syria kind of ties everything together in a meaningful way, because they need Hezbollah and Iranian support, but Israel has actually killed and decapitated the Hezbollah leadership in Lebanon, and they punished Hezbollah by punishing the Lebanese civilian population by ruthlessly bombing them and killing them. So Hezbollah conceded and decoupled themselves from the genocide going on in Gaza, but simultaneously they're like licking their wounds, and they have to do a period of reconstruction now. And in that process, they can't actually move into Syria and help the Syrian government defend against the Salafist uprisings or the rebel groups, some of which are secular too. It's not like they're all Salafists either. And also, Russia is too caught up in invading Ukraine and pummeling Ukraine into the ground, as though they're the bad guys in that process, and they can't offer logistical support and even air support to the Syrian government to overtake Aleppo once again, as they did in the past. But also Russia, it is very important for Russia to, not lose Syria, not lose the Assad government. This is why yesterday I was like, I don't want to dive too far into it. And Syria obviously has a bunch of different ethnic and religious minorities as well, so they're probably not exactly fond of the ISIS guys taking over Aleppo. And the ISIS guys actually have a lot more media training now, which is kind of funny to say. I know they've separated themselves from ISIS. They've separated themselves from Al-Qaeda. They've separated themselves from Al-Qaeda and ISIS, but, they're still fundy overall. So then you have all these like Christian Druze, all these other populations, and even the Sunni Syrians who are like, well, I don't want ISIS. I don't like Assad either, but I don't know if I want ISIS to rule the area. So then you have this weird predicament where these guys are coming in and they're like, no, don't worry. We have our own press. We have our own guys. We're actually going to be, we're the old Al-Qaeda. We're not going to run this like Al-Qaeda, but we might actually do Al-Qaeda. And if they do Al-Qaeda, it's not going to look good. It's not going to be good for all the populations that live there. It's a, horrifying predicament. Syria is an example of non-linear warfare. All sides of shit and allegiances are confusing and constantly shifting. The result is the Syrian people suffering while USA, Russia, Turkey, and others get to play with their weapons of war. Yeah, I do also, in a weird way, find it interesting. Like, I do find it funny because, like, everybody always says I'm like an unconditional rider of the Turkish government and that I'm an Islamist fundamentalist, but the American State Department is on board with the Islamist fundamentalists in this situation. The Al-Qaeda guys, and they are not directly funding and facilitating the actions of the Al-Qaeda guys, but they're doing it by way of Turkey. Turkey's a NATO country. Turkey also is bombing the Kurds, which many of my naysayers will say, Hasan, you love when Turkey bombs the Kurds. I don't. I actually very actively criticize that all the time. But also simultaneously, I'm not exactly fond of like I said, the former ISIS guys and the former Al-Qaeda guys coming in, and they're being backed and trained by Turkey. So I guess now all of my naysayers, now that the American State Department is on board, is going to say these guys are the moderate rebels, actually. So yeah, the Kurds are good. Yes, it's a weird situation, and we'll see. We'll see how it develops. As a Kurd, I don't think America gives a shit about us. They just use Kurds against ISIS because they were not fundamental, that they were most ready to fight ISIS, and now just use them as a chip to reign in Turkey. Yeah, I've said this many, many times over. The rebels are almost entirely led by ex-ISIS members who have ethnically cleansed Kurds on multiple occasions, and Assad is incredibly cruel. Exactly. No good sides overall. None of the major players are doing good shit. My new optometrist, his name is Bashar al-Assad. There it is. I have an announcement. I've been talking quite a bit about my new optometrist. His name is Bashar al-Assad, okay? The Lion of Damascus. Oh, I will not be playing the song. People are already up my ass.
Their descent on Aleppo has been blistering in its speed, taking the Syrian regime and the world by surprise. Opposition fighters now control much of the city, and they're vowing to take the capital, Damascus.
What is that? What's that patch? I don't know what that patch. Maybe it's Red Scare. Y'all, it could be the Red Scare. They could be Red Scare listeners. They could be fans of Red Scare, the podcast. Honestly, I don't know what it is. It just I don't know. I don't speak Arabic. I can't read Arabic. It just like looked weird to me. I've only seen like patches like that on guys that don't have the best opinions, Yeah, maybe he has a helmet. He takes it off. He's like, remember who you're fighting for, and it's a photo of Dasha inside his helmet.
Damascus next.
Stop doing purity spirals. I think it's kind of funny to see American and Western media literally look at these guys going Allahu Akbar, who like openly have supported, but also on top of that, like engaged in what they consider to be global jihad. And I don't mean like jihad as in normal struggle. I mean like global jihad in the way that Americans presented. It's these guys that have done that and want that. And it's kind of funny that these are the good guys, the guys that actually have done that. And the guys that don't want to do that at all, those are the guys that want to do the global jihad.
So far, they've met little resistance, skidding cars in one of the main plazas in celebration. And in the advance...
Most of the rebels aren't ISIS, though. That's not what I said. I never said the rebels are ISIS. I just said that across the board, when people talk about the Syrian rebels, like, it's identical to the Mujahideen structure, okay, in Afghanistan, in the lead up to the Afghan Civil War, in the lead up to the USSR intervention. This is exactly what happened, okay? That's what you said. No, I didn't say that. I actually said there are secular rebel forces as well. And I also, but a lot of the larger motion, a lot of the larger movements are coming from the Turkish-backed, Turkish-backed fundamentalist former ISIS and former Al-Qaeda militants in the area. Okay, their leader is literally a former. But they're not the prominent ones. They absolutely are the prominent ones. What are you talking about? Incoming Hasan, you can't use Afghanistan politics as a template to analyze Syria. Yes, you're not even wrong about that. I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison. I just think that America's intervention and involvement in the region is, quite similar. Wikipedia says ISIS is HTS's opposition.
Symbols and statues of the Assad dictatorship are not being spared, toppled wherever they once stood.
Yes, for the record, in the interest of fairness, they are not currently Al-Qaeda. HTS is not currently Al-Qaeda. It's just led by a man named Jelani, who is formerly Al-Qaeda. They officially cut ties with Al-Qaeda. But there's a lot of cross-pollination.
War was dormant, at a stalemate, but not anymore. Aleppo is a huge prize for the rebels, as it was a major center of power for the regime.
To see the entire city fall in 20...
They have purged most Al-Qaeda members as well. I don't think I would go that far. Their leader has purged Al-Qaeda members from HTS. They're trying to pull moderate for unity. I don't think I would go that far. Their leader is also former Al-Qaeda, and I don't think that they have reformed or anything. I think that Jelani has said he no longer wants to do global jihad. He was mistaken. He does not want to fight the West. And I think the reason why he says that is because he's getting funded by the Turkish government. He's getting help from the Turkish government, a NATO ally, and that is a way for the American government to not directly fund former Al-Qaeda militants that they still consider to be on the terror watch list, but it's actually a cutout operation. That's why NATO is very important. That's how NATO works. You get your NATO ally to do the dirty work for you that you would normally want to do directly, but you can't do it directly because then it's like, whoa, what about the rule-based international order? Like, what's going on? It's kind of weird. Why are you giving these guys direct funding and money and weapons and training? I don't really get it. And then they can say plausible deniability. Plausible deniability, we're not actually directly funding them. It's actually Turkey that's directly funding them. And it's weird because ISIS has also duked it out in a certain, like, because of the infighting between ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and also HTS even, given their not, I wouldn't say ideological differences, but given the power vacuum that was created in the region due to this instability, they have at times fought one another. It's like ISIS also operates within, ISIS has literally blown up targets inside of Turkey. So while at the same time, Turkey is like looking at all these Salafist militias and going, great, let's train them. Okay, let's give them weapons. Some of the other groups that fight with one another from time to time in the power vacuum also end up attacking Turkey as well. So it's a little bit more complicated than just these guys hate these guys. They never actually align with one another on anything. That's why I gave you the example of the Kurdish militia forces that are also backed by and offered logistical support. But like literally, they are the American militias on the ground, okay? The Kurdish militias are American forces on the ground, basically. They were most successfully utilized against ISIS in the region. That is before we even talk about like ISIS's inception. There's a lot of American intervention and involvement in ISIS's inception as well, but that's besides the point at this, in this analysis that has no, that's unimportant. The Kurds are not backed by anyone. That's completely untrue. The Kurds were originally backed by America. Not only are you wrong, I have literally had someone who went and fought in Rojava on this broadcast, a good friend of mine. His name is Brace Belden. So not only are you wrong, but also you're so wrong that you're, denying reality, but also I have a more personal understanding of what exactly took place there. Kurdish militias in the region are America's greatest weapon. They're a stateless people. It's understandable. They have an understandable desire for having a state of their own, 35 million diaspora. Americans love going to them and going, hey, you guys have reasonable demands. You want to make a state for yourself? Well, guess what? We're going to offer you weapons. We're going to give you training. And then we're going to sick you on whoever we want to destabilize the area a little bit, or even use you as a group that will engage in a cleanup job to take care of our former problems with ISIS, for example. And then once we're done, you're done. Once we're done, hey, peace. Have fun. That's the American attitude, usually. They'll go, hey, we gave you the weapons, we gave you the training, and then the Turkish military comes in and just like starts bombing villages. That's usually how it goes with the American involvement with the Kurds.
Today is I mean, beyond dramatic. It's like an earthquake in the scale of the last 13, 14 years of the Syrian crisis.
It is uncertain when this lightning attack will end.
Can you give one example of when they went somewhere on the U.S.'s order? Wait, what? You're making the SDF sound like mercenaries, but I'd like an example of where they went that they weren't interested in going already. I think one of the things that people refuse to understand, is that something that I always talk about is the valid concerns that people have. Okay? That's why I brought forth the understandable desire of Kurdish people to have their own nation state. Okay? 35 million in diaspora. So they have an understandable desire, which is why they're aligning with America, even if they don't agree with America. Okay? I'm not saying that these guys are being utilized as a mercenary that is being directed towards whatever America wants to. America just understands that they can use the Kurdish militias in their just cause or in their understandable desire for, building a nation state to its advantage to use it against America's other enemies in the region or to engage in destabilization. This does not mean that America goes, hey, Kurds, go and pack these people up. Okay? That's not what I'm saying at all. I've never said that. It's more so a age-old colonial ambition, which is to use sectarian infighting that is organic and naturally occurring in the region or any sort of instability to your benefit. As a matter of fact, I've even brought forth the reasonable and very valid concerns that many Syrians had with the Assad regime at the time that turned very quickly into something that maybe wasn't so reasonable or wasn't so honest in terms of, these ISIS and Al-Qaeda style groups basically taking advantage of that instability. So that's it. Same with Hong Kong. Like, I totally understand why you would not want additional draconian measures implemented, okay? Especially if you're a young guy in Hong Kong, you're like, oh, I'm terrified of the Chinese government coming in, okay? You're not immediately thinking, oh, we're going to have more high-speed rail, maybe even better, maybe even more housing units or whatever. You are understandably frustrated because the Chinese government is pretty restrictive, okay? That's just the truth. So you might have a real interest in protesting against this intervention, okay? But that doesn't mean that other states that have an interest in destabilizing won't use that valid protest to their own advantage. What I'm describing is so commonplace in the entire region of the Arab Spring that what's his name wrote a really good book about this in particular. It happened in Brazil as well. It happens all around the world. Thank you. Vincent Bevins wrote a book about this. He wrote Jakarta Method as well. But he wrote another book recently about specifically this. I believe it was called, If We Burn is the name of the book, where he talks about how protests happen naturally and organically when people are frustrated with their governments. And then foreign actors will take advantage of that, or nascent fascist movements and nascent reactionary movements, oftentimes even backed by foreign actors, will then go in and co-opt the protest to turn it into something different. Okay? This has happened time and time again. This has happened in Syria. This has happened in most of the Arab Spring uprisings. And there's a reason why like America, for example, doesn't see Sisi in a similar fashion to the Assad regime, right? Because there was a real popular uprising backed by the Muslim Brotherhood, and it was squashed very violently. But it was squashed by our guys. It was squashed by our friends, our allies. So there's not much stink about that sort of thing. Let's continue.
It started just a few days ago with the rebels quickly moving through the countryside. The people here can't believe how suddenly it's changed.
We suffered greatly in the refugee camp, complaining to God. But when I returned yesterday and today to the village and found it liberated, it was an indescribable joy.
The landscape here has been pummeled by artillery with smoke and the sound of shelling echoing across the horizon. The opposition, backed by Turkey and led by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, say the offence has been launched to stop government airstrikes on its territory in northwest Syria.
We in the Military Operations Department stand up to our responsibilities to put an end to the transgressions of this criminal regime and protect our people.
The attack shows the weakness of President Assad's regime.
Bro, that's the quickest way. That is the quickest way to get an ankle injury, okay? How are you not going to zip it up all the way, dog? You're going to break an ankle, 100%.
The attack shows the weakness of President Assad's regime as its allies fight in other wars, with Russia bogged down in Ukraine and Iran and its proxies weakened in the conflict with Israel. Syria's dictator has been left exposed. Syrian and Russian jets are now launching heavy counterstrikes. This is the aftermath of an assault on central Aleppo. The ground is covered with blood. For the last few days, opposition fighters have been virtually unopposed. But President Assad's government says it's temporary and is vowing to push them back.